Recently I went in search of the final resting place of an alleged Grand Master of the mythical Priory of Sion in London, and ended up finding a further mystery. I had hoped to find the grave, or at least some marker of the interred remains of Charles Radcliffe, the titular 5th Earl of Derwentwater. Radcliffe was named as a Grand Master of the fabled order in the infamous Dossier Secret, which spawned the pseudo-historical book Holy Blood and the Holy Grail, as well as Dan Brown's novel The Da Vinci Code. According to the documents, he took over the role from Sir Isaac Newton, with previous holders of the post allegedly being Leonardo da Vinci, the Rosicrucian and occultist Robert Fludd, Renaissance painter Sandro Botticelli, and other historical luminaries. Now, it is largely accepted that the Dossier Secret were fabricated as part of an elaborate hoax to put a conman on the French throne, with the suggestion that he would be restoring the line of the ancient Merovingian monarchy. But some still maintain that the Priory of Sion was a real organisation that stemmed from the Knights Templar after they allegedly discovered staggering secrets in the Temple Mount during the Crusades. Some have mooted that these finds relate to the alleged offspring of Jesus and Mary Magdalene, the discovery of the Ark of the Covenant, or some other secret that could shake Christianity to its foundations and make the Templars immensely powerful. Whether any of that is true or not does not alter the facts pertaining to the fascinating real life of Charles Radcliffe and the place where his remains were buried in 1746. This location is St Giles in the Field in the London borough of Camden, which began as a leper colony and monastery. The churchyard at one time was home to thousands of the souls of those unfortunate enough to have been ravaged by the disease, as well as the later decapitated remains of Radcliffe. It was also the site down the years of unspeakable retribution meted out to so-called religious heretics. But let's go back a bit and discover some details of the life of the 5th Earl of Derwentwater, and why he may have been included in the list of alleged Grand Masters of the Priory of Sion, fraudulently or otherwise. Charles Radcliffe had royal blood. He was born in September 1693 to Mary Tudor, an illegitimate daughter of King Charles II. His father was Edward Radcliffe, 2nd Earl of Derwentwater, an English peer and viscount. So far, so establishment, but there was a problem for the Radcliffes, namely that they were Catholics. Moreover, they had long-standing ties to the deposed and exiled Stuarts, and the Radcliffes had more than a taste for rebellion. A failed uprising in 1715 led to Charles and his brother James being found guilty of treason and sentenced to death the following year. Witnesses at the trial said Charles was the ringleader, but despite efforts to save him, James was executed at Tower Hill in February 1716. In December of the same year, Charles escaped from Newgate Prison with 13 other prisoners when a door was left open and fled to France. He spent the next 30 years on the run in Europe, spending a number of years in Rome, the location of the Stuart court in exile after 1718. Like a number of prominent Jacobites, Radcliffe was a Freemason who was said to have served as Grand Master of the Grand Lodge of France in 1738. He was also listed as an officer in another secret society, the Order of the Fleur-de-Lis, one of several organisations claiming to inherit the legacy of the Knights Templar. This, along with his royal connection and his presence in France, might explain why the Priory of Sion connection was made. Ultimately, Charles Radcliffe could not outrun the long arm of British justice forever. This was a time when Britannia still ruled the waves, after all. In November 1745, during the Jacobite Rising, Radcliffe and his son James boarded a French ship running weapons and supplies from Dunkirk to Montrose, a port in Scotland. It turned out to be a fateful decision, as the ship was intercepted and detained by the patrol vessel HMS Sheerness, a 24-gun 6th-rate frigate, when it reached the North Sea. Radcliffe Senior and Junior were apprehended and sent to the Tower of London. Charles, perhaps expecting that this day may one day arrive, had attempted a ruse by being commissioned into Dillon's regiment, part of the Franco-Irish Brigade. This was a common tactic used by the enemies of the Crown to attempt to gain treatment as a prisoner of war, rather than an outlaw rebel. The ploy did not work, however, and Lord Chancellor Hardwicke invoked the 1716 warrant to execute Charles in December 1746. He was spared the ignominious standard punishment of hanging, drawing and quartering, despite not technically being a peer of the realm, and was dispatched by a headsman with one fell swoop instead. It is commonly held that, had he not gone on the run in 1716, Radcliffe would likely have been pardoned. His son James was released and eventually settled in Slindon, West Sussex. My mission to find what's left of Radcliffe was less successful than HMS Sheerness, however. After his execution, the renegade and alleged Priory of Sion Grand Master was buried at St Giles in the Fields in 1746. But despite a thorough search of the fascinating interior of the church and the grounds, there was no trace of him. It transpired that he had not been allowed to rest in peace. I knocked on the door of the church warden to be greeted with the pungent smell of her lunch, and was told that many remains or grave markers had been moved around 40 years ago to St Pancras. It is not known whether this was to St Pancras Old Church, home of the infamous Hardy Tree, and there the trail runs cold. So, whether Charles Radcliffe was a Grand Master of the Priory of Sion or not, and where his mortal remains now lie, is still an enigma. But as with many of history's mysteries, it's the journey that counts more than the destination. But that's it for this video. Don't forget to like, share, and most importantly subscribe. And you can also support the channel on Subscribestar via the link in the description, or via YouTube Super Thanks. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.